now. Today we're going to be talking about securing the future and mastering AI implementation. My name is Paul Conaty. I'm CWSI Client Solutions Director, working out of the office of the CTO at CWSI. I've been with the company over 10 years. My area of expertise is in governance, risk and compliance, particularly around areas like the regulation and data loss prevention, data classification, information lifecycle, and insider risk. With me today, I have Brenda Pessoa. Brenda, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. My name is Brenda Pessoa. I work at Microsoft at the moment as a technical specialist. In my area of passion is data governance, security, and compliance as well. I've been with Microsoft over 7 years and focus now on the security and data governance as well. So it's a pleasure, Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brenda, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. So just the agenda for today's webinar. I'm going to do a short introduction to who CWSI are for anybody who doesn't know us. And then we'll get into the kind of key elements, which are going to talk about the risks and challenges of AI adoption. So again, there's some questions there in the poll that might be relevant. We're going to talk about the kind of important questions that organizations should ask themselves before they look to adopt AI into their organizations. And then we're going to get into some more useful kind of elements in terms of some recommendations around the tools and the approaches you can take to help introduce AI into your organization in a secure way. And then finally, I'd like to talk to you briefly about an assessment, a security assessment that CWSI can do that would help you with preparing for a rollout specifically of Microsoft's Copilot. Just to be aware, the chat will be open throughout the session. So if you have any questions, we'll ask you to put them into the chat. Microphones will be muted. We will try and hold some time at the end for questions, but if there's questions that come up during the session, we're more than happy to address them as they come in rather than waiting to the end. And the more interaction we get, the better, because we're really here to hopefully help you guys in rolling out or addressing any of your challenges around adopting AI in your organization. So very quickly around who CWSI are. CWSI are an Irish-based company who have expanded over the last couple of years to a number of other countries. We specialize in the area of allowing people to do what's called modern working or working securely from anywhere. Our background would have been originally in mobile working and securing mobile devices, iPhones and Android in a post-BlackBerry world. But we've since then grown to cover kind of all kind of areas around working from any device, any network, any location in a secure way. That has led us obviously to be cloud security experts, because the way that all modern kind of remote or work from anywhere is enabled is through cloud. So we have cloud security part of our business. Obviously we have our kind of heritage in terms of endpoint security. As I said, it was originally mobile, but has expanded into Mac OS, Windows, and even starting to look at things like wearables, IoT, the areas of augmented reality and virtual reality headsets, which are all kind of niche but growing areas in terms of productivity tools for organizations. My area that I specialize in is the GRC and advisory space. So we do like cyber strategy, we do consulting, advisory and implementation, configuration, design work, all around compliance and compliance tooling and security tooling. So that would be around data classification, data privacy, data lifecycle management, insider risk, data loss prevention, all those kind of areas. And then we also have, through our team in the Netherlands, a secure app development arm. So we specialize in developing kind of niche applications for security-minded organizations, for example, policing, healthcare, and that's a part of the business that has done a lot of work around building applications for very security conscious organizations. Maybe have to be adhering to specific regulations and ensuring that those applications meet all those requirements. As I mentioned, the CWSI as a company was founded in Ireland in 2011. And then we acquired a number of businesses over the last couple of years. First of all, in the UK, where we've HQ in Reading. And then we also expanded to 2 new companies, Mobco and Bloud, based in the Netherlands and Belgium and Luxembourg. We've offices now in Utrecht and Brussels, and that allows us to sell our services across all Western Europe. And we also would have a global reach because we have a number of multinational customers that we service also. Okay, so I'd like to get into now and talk about the key kind of risks and challenges that we see organizations would have around adopting artificial intelligence, LLMs, into their organizations, whether that's Copilot, whether that's ChatGPT, or whether that's any of the other plethora of different solutions out there. And I'd just like to go back to the poll that we ran at the start, and thank you very much for completing it. So of the 3 kind of key areas that we put in the poll, the privacy one seems to be the primary concern. So we have 48% of you are concerned about privacy, which is interesting. And then the second one would be around data loss. So obviously that's organizational data loss, and that could also be related to privacy. So losing data or data breach, and that was 38% of you. And then a slightly smaller number, 14%, worried about hallucinations and accuracy. And we're going to talk about each of those in a bit more detail now in a few minutes. Okay, so lack of visibility and the inability potentially to detect and mitigate risk has been a big concern of organizations. So this is from a data security report commissioned by Microsoft in October last year, and where 43% of organizations said lack of controls to detect and mitigate risk is a top concern. So we definitely see this, right? There's an absolute shed load of AI tooling has started to be used in organizations. Obviously, the big ticket items like ChatGPT, LLMs from the likes of ServiceNow, maybe from Meta, from Salesforce, Oracle, Microsoft's Copilot. But there's lots of little small ones as well. We see a lot of people using things like translation services or using other kind of tooling services, and there's thousands and thousands of these available online. And many of those are not built as enterprise grade applications, and traditional security controls are having to adapt to manage how AI tooling works. So it's not surprising that we see a lack into what's going on in those AI tools, and a lack of ability to detect any potential risky activity, i.e. the concerns that people have expressed around privacy, so private data being accessed or exposed, or around data loss, so data being potentially uploaded or shared via these AI tools that could lead to organizational risk. And then following on from that lack of controls to protect data shared in AI, 35%. Again, this was a survey of over 600 data security professions last March, or March last year, sorry, again, commissioned by Microsoft. So a lot of organizations are really worried about the tooling that goes in to protect data sharing. So obviously, most of us would have hopefully pretty mature tools to protect sharing via more traditional methods like email, like uploading into cloud services, like things like SharePoint. But AI is a whole new kind of technology, and as I said, all the kind of exponential growth in those tools, and all of them mean kind of either cloud, internet, web browser, or maybe mobile app or desktop app accessible, means that your data could be going into those without any visibility from your traditional DLP or protection from your traditional DLP. So that's something that we see a lot of people concerned about. And obviously there's an increased regulatory pressure. So we have AI Act in Europe. We have similar acts in progress or coming into place in the likes of the US, in Singapore, in Australia, in Korea. There's a number of different countries that are trying to put in different legislation in the UK. And then we also see kind of ancillary regulation, GDPR, obviously around the privacy one that a lot of you are concerned about, and its equivalents like the CCPA in California, and again, like lots of other countries have those as well. And then, large things like the Cyber Resilience Act or NIS2 or equivalents, which are putting a lot of regulatory pressure on organizations to protect any kind of data through any kind of supply chain or any kind of tooling, and AI falls under all that as well. So there is an increasing regulatory framework being developed, not just in Europe, but globally, which organizations are going to have to adhere to, and AI is just another set of tools that you need to think about putting controls around and putting good governance and compliance wraps around if you want to use them in your organization. Otherwise, you could be subject to a non-compliance or an audit or some kind of enforcement action by a regulator. And there's a prediction by Gartner, it's from their Security Leaders Guide from September last year, from polling and from their own internal analysis, that by 2027, which is not that far away, at least one global company will see its AI deployment banned by a regulator for non-compliance with data protection or AI governance legislation. Most likely, this will probably be some kind of proprietary or roll your own AI that's being used to manage or process large amounts of data, potentially customer data from a privacy point of view. But that's the prediction that Gartner is saying, and I think it's a reasonable prediction to make because most of those frameworks will be mature and in place through 26 through into 27. So what are some of the concerns that we haven't maybe touched on yet? So we've talked about the visibility into the usage of AI applications. So, for example, lots of organizations out there may not be aware that their staff are using AI applications already in their environment. They may not have implemented any controls using firewalls or CASBs or other tooling to prevent that, because most of these are just web applications or maybe applications on their mobile devices that people are accessing to use AI. And we're also starting to see a lot of legitimate vendor enterprise software baking AI into their offering. There's things like Jira, there's lots of business ERP, CRM solutions out there, ServiceNow, Salesforce, etc. All of them are looking to implement AI into their tooling, and these may or may not be turned on or off for your organization. A lot of organizations don't know what is the state of play at the moment, and that can obviously lead to security and compliance challenges. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And this can lead to data leak. So a very simple example would be someone, using an AI tool to maybe translate a document or edit a document for them, parse it and asking it to be rewritten in a more formal way. That document could be, or the content of that document is most likely being uploaded to a cloud solution. So you've now lost control of it potentially. You don't know where that cloud solution is hosted. You don't know what security controls are in place. So data leak is definitely a concern. Oversharing. So AIs are very, very efficient at surfacing data in organizations, and this is something we'll talk about in much more detail later. But that could lead to, if you haven't got strong access controls, or maybe you have some gaps in your controls around your data, how it's siloed and how it's organized in your organization, could mean that people get access via the AI to data they shouldn't. So that could be proprietary IP, that could be private, personal, like from a data privacy point of view, information like salary information or employee information, or it could be sensitive information about mergers or acquisitions or something else. That would be a concern. And then finally, users using the AI inappropriately, either deliberately or accidentally, to create potentially unethical or high-risk content. So there's a couple of examples you could think of there. Someone could use the AI to create a targeting of for marketing, but they could be breaching something like GDPR, or they could do something with medical information, create a new drug or something like that that would be considered unethical or dangerous. And these are examples. The first one is obviously an example of data loss prevention, and DLP controls are what we will be talking about later, how you would deal with that. Information protection, data classification is kind of the issues around the middle one, around the oversharing. And then the non-compliance or the inappropriate use will be something like insider risk. And we'll talk about all of those in more detail. And again, please, just to remind you, if you have any questions on anything we're talking about, please do throw them into the chat and we'll try to address them during the session or at the end. So an example here would be a fictional organization. We'll take the mythical Microsoft Contoso organization. In this case, they're using Gen AI to predict harmful and unintended reactions to medications. So they're trying to use its ability to help with analysis. Without having controls in place and governance in place, these are kind of risks that you could expect with that. So obviously medical data could include personal data. So you have a data privacy issue there, like personal identifiable information or personal health information. So you're talking about personal data or sensitive category data from a GDPR point of view. So you could violate the patient's privacy rights if the AI did that in an unsafe way. Which obviously is going to lead to loss of customer trust, but also could lead to severe regulatory impact through something like GDPR or HIPAA or something like that. The AI could expose the data. It may not have good security controls. It may not have good data sharing controls, or as I mentioned, the actual back end of the AI where it's hosted may not be secure, and so that could lead to data loss. Which would be obviously dangerous if your competitors got access to that data, but also will be, again, in the realms of data breach and regulatory compliance. And as that's kind of addressed in the final point there is you may not be following regulations or ethics principles. So there's a bunch of regulations that you could get into trouble for, as we've kind of alluded to here. There's the things like GDPR, there's things like HIPAA, if you're talking about health information. But there's also the new AI legislation that's coming through in Europe, specific requirements around ethical use of AI as well. So you could be facing multiple breaches of compliance and regulation. So to kind of summarize what the key risks of Gen AI would look like, let's think about some examples. So the privacy concern, data exposure via training models. So the simplest example I've seen is, and I've actually seen this happen already in customers, is company data being exposed via translation services. So you have a document, you need to translate it into Dutch, you need to translate it into French, you need to translate it into Spanish. You use one of these online translation services that use AI. There are literally dozens of them. And then there's also capabilities built into other AI solutions like the bigger named ones. In many cases, they will ask you to upload the document or copy the document into a browser. So you're now taking your confidential contract information, your confidential internal document, you're saving it to a tool, and you have absolutely no idea where that tool is hosted. If you're an EU-based company, there's a high probability that that website is hosted outside the EU, so straight away you're in danger of breaching GDPR. You're also probably breaching NDAs with your customers if you're exposing any customer information or vendor or partner information to that third-party solution. And also you're also taking a risk that the translation itself could be inaccurate. So there's lots of number of risks there about how you could expose your company data via that service. Incorrect use of copyright or sensitive material, and this is a big concern because we didn't speak about copyright in terms of the regulatory experiment, but copyright is going to be a big deal. Out of the box, most LLMs have no idea about copyright and are quite happily infringing copyrights left, right, and center with images, with content when it's surfacing content and creating new content. So the data access controls typically can be quite weak or non-existent around copyright or sensitive material. So it doesn't understand what IP is or client data, sensitive data. So it could return all of those in query responses. So that could be from your internal sources, or if you're also surfacing stuff from the web. So you could be generating marketing content. You may not realize that you're infringing copyright in images that you're using or content that you're using. So you need to be very careful about that. And then the one that only 14% of you mentioned you were worried about is around hallucinations. So the generative AI creates false or inaccurate content. A very good example of this recently was in a New York case where a law firm were using analysis around case law to put into a submission, and the AI actually generated fake, non-existent case law and cited it. So it gave a citing, but when they double checked it, they realized that the actual case law being cited wasn't real. So you can imagine that could be extremely dangerous if you were doing a submission. And that's a good example of where hallucinations could get people into trouble, and why it would be very important that you don't solely rely on AI when you're generating content for various different purposes. And finally, prompt engineering. So this is something I might talk about when we talk about what we do in our Copilot assessment, but there is capability through an insider or potentially someone who's compromised one of your users' accounts, an attacker, to manipulate prompts to potentially bypass security controls. The common phrase of an attacker, typically will be in your organization environment for a number of months to do landscaping before they trigger a ransomware or a data exfiltration and ransom request or blackmail. That could be much, much shorter if they were able to get access to an LLM to do the data surfacing for them. And then you also have potential problems where staff could use prompts, in a red teaming type fashion to try and break out of the guardrails or try and trick it into giving them access to data that they typically wouldn't get access to maybe infer or see information that they're not authorized to see. So that's something, again, that you would need to think about is how strong are the controls, and are we exposed there that a malicious actor could use the LLM prompts to do something, give them access to data, or to break other controls, or maybe even run code, etc. So there's a number of different concerns there. So they're the kind of key areas that we talk to customers about, or that customers talk to us about, that they're concerned about around using any type of generative AI tool. And then finally, because this is going to be talking a lot about Copilot today, and because I think Copilot can answer some of these questions, there are some very specific risks and challenges I'd like to finish on in this section around Copilot. So the first and probably the most important thing that I think all of you should take away and realize is Copilot runs in the user's context, i.e. it can access everything you as the user can, even if you don't know you can. So you as a user who use Copilot, whatever access, whatever documents that have ever been shared to you that you've ever had access to, Copilot can get access to them as well. So if you don't have strong role-based access, if you've got users who've been in your organization for a period of time and have moved roles multiple times, and you haven't been cleaning up their access, that potentially means that the Copilot could very efficiently surface all that data, and the user themselves might not be aware that they had access to this. So obviously that runs the risk of breaching confidentiality and access controls. Copilot doesn't reach out to the web by default. However, this can be enabled either at the organization level or with individual users potentially, either using Copilot for Bing or the main Copilot. And also it can use graph connectors to reach out to external or third-party sources, i.e. CRMs, ERPs, applications, data lakes, or data warehouses, etc. And that number of plugin support is increasing all the time. So you need to think about what could, other than my internal data in SharePoint, OneDrive, email, what else could Copilot potentially have access to? Because again, if the user has access to it, if it's connected via graph, Copilot could potentially access that data as well. Copilot doesn't understand natively sensitivity, copyright, or confidentiality of data unless you've implemented sensitivity labels using something like Purview, which is something like Brenda will talk about shortly in more detail. So unless you have put in information protection controls, Copilot doesn't know that a document is sensitive itself. So it will just happily surface the data and serve it up to you without making any note that it's breaching any copyright or sensitive data while doing so, unless you've actually implemented information protection. And then finally, just there is a whole new index you need to think of based in Graph, which it uses to make these queries more effective. This index by default will look at all of your available SharePoint sites in Graph, as I mentioned, but you can block that. So, and again, that's maybe a recommendation we can talk about later on, in that even if you haven't got information protection in place, there is some capability to limit the third-party connectors and specific SharePoint sites from that index. But if you don't, by default, everything will be included in that index. So that's what you need to think about. So finally, the kind of key questions we would recommend you ask yourself are as follows. 1, what controls are in place to ensure the Gen AI tools cannot expose your corporate data to third parties? So what DLP controls do I have? What detection and blocking controls do I have to ensure my staff don't expose data to either approved or unapproved Gen AI tools? Do you or does your organization have mature and robust data security and access controls in place so that the queries will only surface the data? So as I mentioned, have you kept your access control clean and tidy? Are your SharePoint documents, your OneDrive documents, your emails, or your on-prem file repositories or other repositories that could be surfaced by Copilot? Have you got good access controls in place? Have you, are you avoiding access creep? And are you implementing kind of least privilege and good kind of zero trust confidentiality around your data and access controls? Do you have monitoring controls in place to ensure those queries and outputs don't breach any governance, risk, and compliance requirements, i.e. the one that a lot of you are concerned about, privacy or industry regulations? So are you able to see what people are querying and in their prompts and what the outputs of those prompts are, to make sure that you're not breaching anything? And finally do you have any detection or protection controls in place to ensure those prompts are not being used to bypass any access controls or expose data? So again, going back to that kind of red teaming or inappropriate use by a malicious insider or a compromised user who has been hacked or compromised. Brenda, before I hand over to you, is there any other kind of things that you'd like to add around these kind of key questions that organizations should be asking themselves before they implement an AI tool?
I think you covered most of the points, especially for this audience that's looking more in terms of data loss prevention, privacy concerns. So these are the things that I will address in the next points, and how you can use the Microsoft Purview tools to help address those points.
Brilliant. Thank you. And again, guys, if you have questions, please throw them into the chat, and we'll, as I said, we can address them throughout the webinar. I'm going to hand over to Brenda now to, discuss in detail what the recommendations and controls that you could put in place around specifically Copilot, but also the view around AI itself, and to protect yourself against all these risks and challenges I've just been speaking about. So Brenda, if you want to take over.
Yeah, you can go over to the next point. So just to talk a little bit how you can use the Microsoft tools to help address all these concerns that I think Paul put brilliantly, is making sure, first of all, that you are using the tool to detect sensitive data in the prompts and also in the outputs. So Microsoft Purview provides pre-built classifiers, and those are to detect the information, the sensitive information, such as, for example, credit card numbers, passport details, and also you can use that to create your own custom sensitive information type. So these classifiers help identify sensitive information in the Copilot. interactions, and you can then configure the data loss prevention policies to prevent this sensitive data from being returned in prompts. So it means that even if the employee, so with all the user interactions that they will have with the copilots, you are able to prevent those from coming to the user and being shown, which I will give you an example later with a screenshot of how this looks like. So just to make sure all the user interactions with Copilot are logged, and this is to enable the organizations to review the activities and also identify potential risks. So if your employees are asking questions that they shouldn't, they will not have the answers, but you're still able to see what are the questions and how you can make sure that you train people, that you bring awareness, how this can be a potential danger for the organization. Also, with the communication compliance in the Microsoft purview, you can use machine learning to detect violations across different communication channels. And this is with Microsoft Teams, this is with Exchange Online and so on. So this capability can also be extended to Copilot. So communication compliance doesn't work only with Copilot, but with all communications that you have within your organization. Okay. Yeah, the next one is, how do I make sure that I prevent sensitive data from being returned in the prompt? So yes, the employees are asking, but you want to make sure that they are not getting the answer because it's not supposed to be exposed. So first thing is make sure that you have your sensitive labels in place. So once a sensitive label is applied to a document or email, it can also enforce encryption. So this is to ensure that only the authorized people, only the authorized users can access that content. And this encryption can be configured to restrict access based on the user roles, on the groups, or even specific conditions that you might want to have a look. For instance, let's suppose that a document is labeled as confidential. These can be encrypted so that only the people, only the employees in the finance department can access it. And these labels can also be applied manually, okay, but it can also be automated using the Microsoft Purview tool with the A5 license. So the thing as well that you have to make sure is that you have user access controls in place, okay, and some of these user access controls that you can use is the joiner, mover, lever process that you have, and also the Enter ID access reveal. So the joiner, mover, lever is a process that, for example, when a new employee joins the organization, the tool will automatically grant the appropriate level of access based on their role. And this involves kind of provisioning access to necessary systems and data, while also making sure that all the sensitive information is protected. Once the employee changes roles within the organization, so you make sure that you adjust the access that they need. So you are able to automate the adjustments to these necessary permissions. So, and this is really to make sure that it's updated only the level that they need. It's to avoid really access creep. Once the employee leaves the organization, you want to make sure that all the access, all the information that they have access is revoked immediately, okay? And this is something that you can implement as well with this process to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive information. Business can also use Microsoft Enter ID access reviews to regularly review and also certify users' access to ensure that only authorized users have access to sensitive data and assistance. And these reviews can be scheduled periodically or can also be triggered by specific events. And this can be when the role changes, as I said, or even when a project is complete. So by conducting these access reviews, the organizations can enforce the principle of least privilege access. So it makes sure that the employees have access only to get the job done. And if they need more access, you can create automation, you can create process that they can ask for more. Yep. So the next step, I think Paul put brilliantly, is how you make sure that you ensure that you are meeting the requirements of any regulatory process that you need to follow, okay? So specifically with the AI is using e-discovery to make sure that you understand what are the information that AI is generating. So even for people, for those people that reply that they are concerned with hallucinations, as for example, the case that Paul discussed in New York. So it's making sure that you are looking for the information and collecting that information for review. So Purview Discover allows your organization to search across various data sources. So it's not only in the Microsoft set of tools, but also you can extend this to other tools. And these will include emails, documents, chat message. So you can use to identify the AI generated data that may be relevant to that legal or the compliance requirements that you need to meet. And once that data is identified, it can then be placed on legal hold to ensure it's preserved and not tampered with or deleted. This is crucial, okay? This is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the data during the legal case or the legal proceedings. So it also enables the collection of identified data into a secure repository for further analysis and review. So this ensures that all relevant data is gathered at one place, and you can bring data from outside as well to make sure that you are having everything in one place. Once the review is complete, you can use Purview Discover to remove any data that's no longer needed or that violates compliance policies. And make sure, just so you are sure everything is audited, so all the actions taken is logged in the system, and this is to provide a clear record of how the data was handled. With data lifecycle management in Purview, it's to make sure that you understand the process and of retention, deletion of data, and this is to make sure that you are meeting the regulatory requirements that you need. You can, for example, create retention policies that specify how long Copilot's data should be retained, okay, and when it should be deleted. So once the retention policies are in place, they are automatically enforced across all relevant data sources. And this ensures that Copilot data is retained for the required period and then automatically deleted when it's no longer needed. If we go to the next slide, I know I've mentioned Copilot a lot, but just so you know, Microsoft Purview integrates with many other AI tools like ChatGPT, other tools like Gemini, and so on. And you can also bring this to your own enterprise beauty AI if you are building one using any of the tools that we offer as well. So it's something that you can extend not only with Copilot, you can use not only with Copilot, but you can extend to other tools.
I think, Brenda, as well, we probably don't have it on the slide here, but another really good control, it's in the Defender suite, in Defender for Cloud Apps, is an ability to sanction or unsanction AI applications. So you can only sanction and allow the ones that you have control over or that you trust or that have been integrated with Purview, and then block all of those other ones that I might have mentioned at the start that are out there, so that people can't start, you prevent that kind of shadow IT use of AI in your organization. That's correct, yes?
Yes, that's correct. And it's a good point, because you want to make sure that you have invisibility of those tools and disabling them if they are not kind of aligned with the compliance for the organization. But one thing that I like to always make sure that people understand is you might not be able to keep up with all the AI tools there. And Defender for Cloud Apps will find those. So you have to have a process in place in terms of how you enable, disable new tools. So you can allow all of them and kind of deny as you discover, or you can deny all of them and allow as you trust them more. But making sure that your data is protected, independently of where it's going or where someone tried to take this data, is the most important and critical. So even if you don't have enabling that AI there, if someone copies that file for a USB and try to use that in another PC, a personal PC, so you have to make sure that that document is protected. So even if someone is able to copy this on a USB or send this by email, that data must be encrypted. So only someone that's authorized has access to that data. So there are some ways that people will try to bypass the system, and this is where you have to make sure that your data itself is protected. It doesn't matter where someone is trying to take it. So yeah, this is an example of how Copilot works. So the cool thing about Copilot and the Microsoft Review tools is that Copilot will inherit the label that is in the document. So when users reference a labeled document in Copilot conversation, the entire conversation inherits the same sensitivity label as the reference document. So if it's a confidential document that user has access and is trying to use Copilot to analyze the document, to generate more information in terms of how I handle that information, all that conversation is already is also inherent the label. The next one is another example of someone that doesn't have access to the information and they are asking about a question on Copilot that would require that document. Copilot is able to provide an answer, but say that it's not able to generate response related to that document because I don't have access to that. And as I said, we are also providing capabilities to cover third-party consumer AI applications. So you can now leverage adaptive protection to create dynamic DLP policies so that elevated risk users can be blocked from passing sensitive information or uploading sensitive documents to a third-party AI application such as DALL-E or Bard and so on. So this is where you want to make sure that the protection is in your documents, most of everything, than really kind of looking for everything that's out there. And the next slide, it's about the AI Hub. So if you don't know where to start, use the AI Hub, which is now in preview, to understand and to gather insights of the use of AI in your organization and get some analytics into how AI activities is going on. You have the right to use policies that can help you to protect the data and also prevent data loss in AI prompts. And you have also some information in terms of how you can use compliance controls to apply and optimize the data handling in your organization. So if you are kind of overwhelmed with the amount of information, use the AI Hub to help you get started, okay? And the next,
this is a hidden gem that people aren't aware of in their Purview suite. It's fairly new, but as you can probably see from the screenshot here, there's a lot of really useful information, and it's definitely worth a look. Yeah. The next two slides I will leave there, but I will not comment that much. It's just really kind of a summary of how you should plan, and then how should you start your deployment as well. So use this in combination with the AI Hub to make sure that you understand what's next. And the next slide will show you what are the tools and capabilities that you have with Microsoft that can help you address all the points that we touched here. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you. Once again, any questions, pop in the chat and happy to answer.
Yeah. So there's, as you can probably see from these last couple of slides, everyone, there's a lot of different tooling available in the Microsoft suite. The AI Hub is obviously a new one which can give some good insight into what's going on in your environment. And then when you want to actually take control of it, all this kind of cool tools that Brenda's has been talking about, communication compliance, DLP, retention, and information protection sensitivity labels, are all reasonably mature in Purview, and it's something that we as a Microsoft partner do a lot of work with organizations around implementing. Obviously, the use cases for them are much wider than Copilot, or other AI generated content. As you can see, you can control data going into almost anywhere. It's just another vector for data in, data out, and data processing in your organization that you need to put into your overall data governance plan. I'd like to kind of finish up the webinar today just talking a little bit about how we in CWSI have developed a product to help organizations around getting ready for deploying Copilot into, or even making a decision about whether they're okay to deploy Copilot into their organization. So we've been speaking to lots of organizations on all the kind of concerns and questions that we've spoken about today, and also you can see from the poll, you guys have some of the same ones, and we tried to put together, collate all that information from those different engagements and conversations and put together a kind of a single, relatively quick, straightforward approach that allows us to work with an organization using templates and give them a really good kind of output and understanding of what their current maturity and risk exposure is around implementing Copilot, and a roadmap or kind of effort estimate of what you would need to do to get ready to implement it, and the key things you would need to think about to do that. So you can kind of look at this yourselves. We will be sharing all the slides with everybody after the event. And so I don't think I need to talk about this anymore. This again is just talking a little bit about the challenges. But essentially, I just want to get into the detail of our assessment. So it is a 4-step approach. So essentially what we do at the start is we will do a set of workshops. So we just need to understand what you're planning to do with Copilot, what elements of it are you planning to implement, how are you intending to use it, what are your business requirements around it, and also what are your security and DLP requirements. So what is your risk appetite, what kind of data are you expecting Copilot to be able to interact with, and what level of control do you want to implement on that, or what regulatory requirements do you fall under. So we will evaluate all those risks and challenges. We'll also do some exploration. So we will do some discovery work to have a look at your data to see, what's there, where is it in your environment? Do you already have some exposures that you're not aware of? For example, is there maybe sensitive data sitting in OneDrive that you weren't aware of, that users have shared, and that isn't maybe subject to SharePoint controls? Is there a lot of information historically lying around in email that is kind of going to be surfaced by Copilot, et cetera, et cetera? So we'll have a look at that and do a risk assessment around that just to see where you are. We'll also be looking at what your access control environment looks like. Are you mature? Are you using access reviews? Do you have a strong JML process? Or is there some concern there in that access controls might be a bit lax, or there might be some uncontrolled sharing going on, which is something you would need to address before you implemented Copilot. And we'll create a set of goals and objectives around what you want to do and capture all those requirements. We then all review what controls you have in place, configurations you have in place. We tend to have 2 types of customers: those who haven't deployed anything, or those who have already deployed it, even if it's only in POC or test, or maybe have actually rolled it out, but now want to retrospectively review the security. So we'll look at what configurations are in place. What do you have around things like maybe labels or retention rules? Are you already using some of these capabilities? What have you got in terms of your access controls, etc.? And then we'll put all that into a report that you'll be able to use internally with your senior leadership team to say, well, this is where we are in terms of our maturity and readiness to adopt. So you could be green across the board and ready to go, which would be great, or there could be some areas of concern or some areas of strong concern that you might need to take some need to implement some controls, configurations before you look at rolling out Copilot. And we will include recommendations on any of the findings. So if we find that you have an exposure or a risk, we'll be recommending what you would need to put into place to mitigate that. And then we will establish a roadmap for you. So what's the level of work, what's the activities, and what's the timelines look like to put everything, all these recommendations in place. You know, also help you identify the roles and responsibilities of who needs to do that, both in initial implementation, but also in your ongoing operational management. So, you know, there's going to be a number of things you'll need to think about, like in that AI hub, for example, to allow you to not just roll out Copilot, but manage it in life. And then finally, we will do some red teaming. We will actually do some prompt engineering to try and break controls that you have on your, or demonstrate to you that you have exposure around Copilot in your organization. We have a kind of prompt playbook where we will act as a malicious actor with access to Copilot and see what can be done and show you what those results look like. And then we'll show you in the back end how you can audit and detect those activities. Again, going back to that operational risk management side of things. So how your security compliance teams could detect someone trying to abuse Copilot and you know, break into data or do something unethical or any of the other kind of stuff we've spoken about today. So those are the kind of areas that we cover. It's typically a 3-week process. That looks kind of like this. We do a pre-questionnaire to kind of understand a lot of this. We do a technical workshop. We do that kind of executive workshop around the feedback and recommendations. We do roll out a little POC. We'll show you the controls and stuff that you get out of the box to, you know, at a purely implementing Copilot level. And that would be showing you maybe how you could, you know, block certain SharePoint sites from being surfaced by Copilot, at least until maybe you had sensitivity labels rolled out. Yeah, basically cover any of those kind of recommendations and you know, and those configurations. And then we will do those stress testing elements, that red teaming piece. We'll walk you through the AI hub and how you can use that operationally. We'll show you where to go in the Office 365 audit that Brenda mentioned, and how to use eDiscovery to look for this data. And then we'll follow up around, you know, creating that roadmap for you. So that's everything that we wanted to cover with you today. These are the kind of outcomes you would get from that engagement with us. Hopefully people can see the value of all of that. And we'd just like to leave you, first of all, I'd like to thank Brenda for all of her insight and information. I thought that was really, really useful and great to see, you know, some of those examples, tangible examples of how you would use the controls and what the AI hub can do for you, and all of the other different controls that are available to you across the Defender, Purview, and Entra suites. We're offering, if you want to use this QR code to book a Copilot readiness assessment with us. So you can scan this. We will be, as I said, we will be sharing it afterwards. And my colleague Kate will be putting a copy of the link to this in the chat as well for anyone who's maybe a bit too security conscious to scan a QR code. And I'd just like to thank everybody for their time. I'm just going to check to see, was there any other questions that might have come in at the last minute?
I think there was no questions. And I thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me for this webinar. It's a pleasure working with you and sharing all the insights that we learn inside Microsoft about how secure your data in this age of AI.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Brenda. And yes, as there's no questions, I guess we'll probably leave it there. One final thing to note, there are some further in-person events happening later in Ireland and in the UK. So again, there's QR codes on screen, and we'll share the links as well. If you want to attend those, they're being hosted in Microsoft HQ in Dublin on the 3rd of October, which is in a couple of weeks. And then we're doing one in Microsoft HQ in Paddington on the 23rd of October in London. So yeah, we'll be delighted to meet some of you in person and interact and address any questions or concerns. These will be much more in detail. We will be talking about AI, but we'll also be talking about things like security operations and a big piece around NIS2 regulation and regulation compliance management. So yeah, really look forward to seeing all of you in person at those events, and would like to thank everybody for their time today.